educator and Israel specialist and Israeli wine specialist. So you can talk to him and get his opinion on various wines after services. But it's my pleasure and honor to introduce him and to invite him up to share a few words of Torah with us this morning.
You might need your chumash for this, so keep it handy. Business before pleasure. So the one thing I didn't really mention to Rabbi Henkin, but I also have a relationship with Bethel by association in that one of your former rabbis is now a close neighbor of mine and a good friend, Rabbi Steve Glazer. And he sends his love. And he asked me, please, to say hello to all of you on his behalf. He lives in an apartment building about a mile from my house, and I have lunch with him about once a month, and I lead services at that apartment house once or twice a month. So I see Rabbi Glazer regularly. He's doing well, and he sends his love to Bethel, where he has very fond memories. Also, I want to thank Robin and Fred for bringing a little bit of my local area into the sanctuary. I recognize your talitot from Shirley Waxman, who's also a very dear family friend. There are 3 women in my family. I have a wife and 2 daughters, and all have talitot designed by Shirley. Shirley was my wife's teacher when my wife was 8 years old, and she's about to turn 65, so it gives you an idea how long we've had a friendship with Shirley. So thank you for making me feel very much at home with your talit. And also I see the artwork in the back from Washington artist Philip Ratner. So really, it's like I never left home. So many things to talk about today, so many of them inappropriate to talk about in synagogue, right? So we're not going to talk about what almost happened to Lot's visitors in Sodom. And we're not going to talk about what Lot's daughters decided to do after they escaped from Sodom. Right? I don't know you that well. So we're going to talk about Abraham and Sarah and Avimelech and his sojourn in Gerar. What the biblical commentators, the modern biblical commentators, call the wife-sister motif. Right? We have this convention, this literary story, this motif that appears 3 times in Bereshit, in pretty close succession. One was only last week in Lech Lecha, where just after we meet Avram and Sarai, they go to Egypt. And what does Avram say? Chapter 12 of Bereshit. They have to head down to Egypt because of a famine, and he was about to enter Egypt, and he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. If the Egyptians see you and think she is his wife, they will kill me and let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, that I may remain alive, thanks to you. The Talmud says, and the Midrashim that support the Talmudic text from Bereshit Rabbah, talk about that Abraham is given 10 tests during his lifetime, and they don't always enumerate them exactly. This was maybe the second test, right? This going down to Egypt and coming back. Maimonides in the 12th century is very critical of Abraham. And he said he should have manned up and taken the risk of his life, trusted in God, and not put Sarah's dignity in jeopardy. Maimonides is very, very critical of Avram's behavior. Right, from an issue of morality. So a generation after Maimonides in France is another great Jewish commentator, not as well known as Maimonides, the Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi. And Kimchi says of Maimonides, not so fast. And in Kimchi's comment, I hear an echo of what's happening in Israel today. He said, don't judge Abraham so quickly for making the moral choice to sacrifice Sarah's dignity in order to save his own life. Because by staying alive, he was able to create a situation where perhaps there would be some kind of resolution, and he and Sarah would both come out alive and be reunited. That there was another way out. And that when we look at the hierarchy of mitzvot, that saving a life takes precedence over saving one's dignity. What's interesting about today's repetition of that motif, and if you'll open your Chumash and turn to page 110, there are a couple of things missing in this second use of the wife-sister motif. We don't know how much time has passed, but we can guess. If you want me to do I don't have a whiteboard, and it's Shabbat, so I can't do the math for you. But when Abraham and Sarai first go to Canaan, Abraham is 75, Sarai is 10 years younger than him. So she's 65 then. In next week's, in the third part of today's Torah reading, which we didn't read, right, in the third part of the triennial, in chapter 21, we learn that Sarah is 90 when Isaac is born. So do the math. About 25 years have passed between episode 1 of Wife Sister and episode 2, right? Give or take. It may be a few years before, we don't know how much time passes between chapters, but it's safe to say maybe somewhere around 25 years have passed. What happens to Abraham after he leaves Egypt, right? After it's discovered that it's not his sister, it's his wife. How does he leave Egypt compared to how he came in? He leaves rather wealthy, right? He essentially, as her brother, is paid the bride price. And he gets donkeys and cattle and sheep and goats and money. He's very enriched by the experience. And he comes to Gerar some 25 years later, right? And he's afraid, right, that God isn't known in this area. This is a topic that during Kiddush, if we want to continue the conversation, it's one of the things I want to follow up on because I don't want to take the time now, and that is this idea that is first introduced with Noah and continues here, that our God isn't a particularist God. Adonai is not just the God of the Hebrews, is not just the God of the Jews, but is the God of creation, right? Avraham assumes that Avimelech, by the way, that's a bit of a joke, right? It's like calling the king of Gerar Avimelech would be the English equivalent of calling him Kingity King. Like identifying him as a king, Avimelech means my father was king, which is how you get the job anyway, right? So it's kind of it's a very generic, it's sort of like, King Doe, right? Avimelech, my father was king. So of course I'm king, not that he did anything necessarily to earn the job. And also, when we think of Near Eastern kings from the biblical period, don't think of kings of empire. We're not talking about Alexander the Great or the King of Thrones. Anyway, I guess that was it's too old a series now. We're not talking about kings of empire. We're talking about kings of city-states. We're talking about the equivalent probably of a mayor, right? Maybe he controls a little bit of land outside of his city, but for the most part, these are small-time kings. And Abraham's afraid that Avimelech doesn't recognize Adonai, that there's no fear of God in this place, which Avimelech later on in the narrative tells him, no, in fact, something very unusual happens here. It only happens 3 or 4 times in the Torah. The God of the Jews, the God of the Hebrews, talks to Avimelech. Right? Again, just another piece of evidence that our God is the God of all people, not just the God of the Hebrews. He talks to Avimelech and he says, oh, by the way, don't go near that woman because she's not single the way you were told. I know you're blameless here, right? We can look at the text. Avimelech comes to him in page 110, in verse 3. God came to Avimelech in a dream by night and said to him, you are to die because of the woman you have taken, for she is a married woman. Now Avimelech had not approached her. We know what that means. Now Avimelech had not approached her. He said, "O Lord, will you slay people even though innocent? He himself said to me," meaning Avraham, "she is my sister, and also he is my brother. When I did this, my heart was blameless and my hands were clean." And God said to him in the dream, "I knew that you did this with a blameless heart, so I kept you from sinning against me. That was why I did not let you touch her." Right? So we have this whole exchange, almost as surprising as we'll have in the book of Numbers, when God speaks to Balaam, right, to a non-Hebrew prophet, right, that we recognize that God speaks to others and to Noah as well. And then it goes on, the text goes on, right, and we find out a fact that we didn't know. Let's look at verses 11 and 12. When Abraham is explaining to Avimelech why he told him what he told him, "I thought," said Abraham, "surely there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. And besides, she is in truth my sister." We did not have this fact until now. "My father's daughter, though not my mother's, and she became my wife." Now, Nahum Sarna, who wrote the commentary that we have in front of us in Eitz Chaim, wrote another book called Understanding Genesis. And in that book, Sarna says, apparently, incest with your half-sister is, it's not something we normally brag about. In this case, it must have been drawing on a much older tradition that our ancestors weren't so embarrassed about, even though later we read in the book of Vayikra that's a prohibited relationship, right? And it's one of those things that I love about Torah, that none of our role models are perfect, right? They're all human. They've all made one mistake or another. It gives us permission to be human. Moses overreacts in some situations. Jacob certainly has some parenting lapses with his sons. And the third instance of the wife-sister motif will take place in just a few weeks' readings when we read Toldot, and it's repeated with Isaac and Rebekah. And they do the same thing to another Avimelech, or maybe it's the same Avimelech, also in Gerar. Isaac comes there with Rebekah, and in that case, how does the king find out? It's not because they're brother and sister, right? But how does the king find out? He sees them in public doing something. The word is a word that usually, it's only a word that's very uncommon in Torah. The word is used mitzachek. They were playing with each other in a way that isn't, they weren't playing Monopoly. They were doing something in public, right? What's known colloquially now as PDA, right? Public displays of affection. They were engaged in PDA while they were in Gerar, and it was reported to Avimelech, and he knew, they must not be brother and sister. It must be more than that. So we have this problematic, behavior on Abraham's part, and Rabbi David Kimchi says, don't be so quick to judge. Right? It's very easy of us to take our 21st century morality and look at Abraham and said he should have been more brave, or as Rambam says, he should have trusted in God. And Kimchi says he was relying on a hierarchy of mitzvot, that first we have to preserve life. And once we do that, once we preserve life, then we'll find the solution to our problems. How does this story end? And Robin read the end of the Torah reading for us this morning. So let's look at page 112 on verse 14. Avimelech took sheep and oxen and male and female slaves and gave them to Avraham, and he restored his wife Sarah to him. And Avimelech said, "Here is my land before you, settle wherever you please." And to Sarah he said, right, as if restoring, right, her dignity to her, "I herewith give your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. This will serve as a vindication before all who are with you, and you are cleared before everyone." So Sarah's dignity ends with her dignity intact. Once again, Abraham is enriched by his lie-telling, his half-truth-telling, right? Because she was only half his sister. But she was all the way his wife, right? And Abraham then prays to God, and God healed Avimelech and his wife and his slave girls so that they bore children, right? And they all live happily ever after. Just one more note. Why was the lie believable? What made the lie believable? Here they are, right? Sarah's maybe almost 90. And Abraham's 100 years old, and they're traveling together, and they're childless, right? Isaac hasn't been born yet. And so the plausibility of the ruse was able to be pulled off because of their situation of being childless. And it's only in the next chapter that we learn, to Sarah's great surprise, right? She laughs about it, to her great surprise, that she's going to bear a child. The other thing that's missing here, by the way, that I meant to mention, there's no mention in this second telling, 25 years later, that Sarah's still beautiful. That part isn't here, right? Like, when she's in her 60s and in Egypt, Abraham reminds her, you're so good looking, I'm really worried that they'll take you and kill you. One thing just to tease, if you want to continue the conversation after Kiddush, I'll just tell you one thing. I'm finishing on Wednesday, teaching a class about King David. There's an element of the King David story that draws on this motif as well. If you're curious, we'll follow up with that after Kiddush. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Kol hakavod, Steve. Thank you for teaching and learning. As he said, please feel free to continue the conversation with him at Kiddush. And then after, we'll now make an announcement during Kiddush that he's also going to be teaching afterwards as well in the boardroom. So if you feel free to continue learning with him after Kiddush as well. At this time, though, we're going to come back, bottom of page 184 for Chatzi Kaddish as we continue with our Musaf service.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, וחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה, ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם עולם מעלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומן ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה ברכו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא, ויאמרו אמן.
We rise for the Musaf Amidah. We'll chant pages 185 through 187 together, and then continue privately through page 192. Please feel free to use the Hebrew, the English, or use that time for your own personal prayers.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, v'Konei Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזב עוקר מושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיים את אימת הרב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורווה חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן את החיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. נעריצך ונקדישך כסוד שיח שק וקודש, המקדישים שמך בקודש, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך כל הארץ, כבודו כבודו מלא עולם, משרתם שואלים על זה לזה, היי מקום כבודו לימותם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו יפן ברחמים, ויחונם יחידים שמו ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד, במים בהבה שמה אומרים, שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד, הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שני לנו כל חי, להיות לכם לאלוהים אדוני אלוהיכם. ובדברי קדשך כתוב לאמור, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושך תדאג נקדיש, ושכח לרבינו מלך של עולם ועד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We continue privately.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, ועל כל עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
Page 203.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, במעט דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכנו ויומכנו חיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. אשמע רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח, יתפאר ויתמן ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקדושה בריחו לילה מן כל בחטא ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דהיימרם ביום ויאמרו אמן. תקבל צרחון ובחון לכל ישראל קדם במון שמיה ויאמרו אמן. השלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים לכל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו וכל ישראל ויאמרו Amen.
Page 204.
הן כאלוהינו, הן כאדוננו, הן כמלכנו, הן כמושיענו, מי כאלוהינו, מי כאדוננו, מי כמלכנו, מי כמושיענו. נודה לאלוהינו, נודה לאדוננו, נודה למלכנו, נודה למושיענו. ברוך אלוהינו, ברוך אדוננו, ברוך מלכנו, ברוך מושיענו. אתה הוא אלוהינו, אתה הוא אדוננו, אתה הוא מלכנו, אתה הוא מושיענו. אתה הוא שכתירו אבותינו לפניך את קטורת הסמים.
We rise for Elenu, page 205.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המונם. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו וזולתו, ככתוב בתורתו. וידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא אלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחתנו. דרכנו למלכות שדי לפנות את חורשי הארץ. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו Ushemo echad, Ushemo echad.
You may be seated. This time, we take a moment to remember all those who, though they no longer walk this earth, remain alive in our hearts and minds. As we recognize in the past week, we observed the yurtzites of Eliza Emuev, Gussie Arkowitz, Martha Bean, Ethel Berman, Chana Berman, Rose Bernstein, Joseph Blotner, Owen Dressler, Esther Brown, Edwin Seitlin, Beverly Cohen, David Cohen, Maurice Kornblum, Selma Damsky, Joe Denneberg, Joseph Dim, Toby Fraser, Jean Goddard, Mo Goldstein, Monroe Green, Boris Guberman, Meta Goldman, Molly Eisenberg, Jenny Croman, Benjamin Levine, Ben Levy, Manita Lipman, Sam Muchnick, Nasin Piszczek, Bertha Pollock, Lindsay Raymond, Samuel Rubin, Carol Schneider, Jane Shaman, Evelyn Siegel, Shirley Stein, Sarah Stern, Mikhailov Traeger, Shunya Tsinis, Buzia Weisbreut, Anna Weinstein, Robert Weinstein, Lillian Weissman, and Fira Zadis. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing. As we invite those in mourning and those observing yurtzites to please rise for the Mourner's Kaddish, page 207. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shamei rabba, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha b'rechu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Before we conclude our service, just want to invite Joshua to come back up for a couple brief announcements.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Welcome to any guests joining us for the first time or to anyone joining us for the first time in a while. We're happy to have you at Temple Bethel. I'm asking everyone with us today to introduce yourself to anyone you may not know or may not look familiar to you. First, happy birthday from all of us at Temple Bethel to Jenna Morris. Thank you to Jenna and Jeff Morris for generally sponsoring today's Kiddush Luncheon. I apologize if I got your name wrong because I'm terrible. Don't forget that after lunch, our guest Steve Kerbel will be leading an adult education class focused on Israel in the boardroom. Next Sunday is Veterans Shabbat. Please join us in honoring these important members of our community as they lead services and host a sponsored luncheon. Adult education galore, Rabbi's Beit Midrash has just resumed on a new topic, Judaism's life-changing ideas, and meets Thursdays at noon via Zoom. The second Torah on Tap of this season will take place this Wednesday, November 8th at 7 p.m. at Back 40 Brewing, and will be in partnership with Baptist Church of the Covenant. Speaking of interfaith, The next night, November 9th, we hope you will join us for the annual Interfaith Thanksgiving with Southside Faith Communities, this year at 6 p.m. at Edgewood Presbyterian. Finally, a big thank you to the crowd that joined us last Thursday for the celebration of the Bethel Civil Rights Experience launch. We're open for business. Watch your emails for information about open tours and group bookings. Our first open tour will be Sunday, November 12th from 12 to 1 p.m. P.S. That same Sunday at 2 p.m., you have your choice of villages, and the movie Talk Village will be taking a field trip to Sidewalk Cinemas for the premiere of Jewish Film Week. Don't hesitate to give us a call with questions or for help registering for programs. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Just one more additional quick announcement. Tomorrow, it's at 4 p.m., there's hors d'oeuvres with Orle, so if you want to come hang out with my wife, you can hang out with her at 4 o'clock tomorrow, sponsored by Sisterhood. I won't be hanging out with her because... What she said.
Sunday, December 3rd from 11.
Yes.
Please come. First ever.
So we'll conclude our service today, page 211, with Adon Olam.
Adon Olam Hashem halach b'terem kol yitzir nivra liet nasa v'chefza kol hazai melech shemo nikra v'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yiyeh b'tifara והוא אחד ואין שני, להמשיכו להכבירה, בלי רשת, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצורכב ליבי את צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא בידו הפקיד רוחי בעת ישן והירה ועם רוחי גביעתי אדוני לי ולא יירא.
Please rise for Kiddush. Please join us for lunch in the Cultural Center down that way. Shabbat Shalom, wishing everybody